There's an awful lot about division and things turned upside down, and it's all, the messaging isn't very subtle in this painting.
So it encapsulates his friendship with George.
Yes.
Is that unusual?
It's very unusual. Well, it is, I think, the most important year in Tudor England.
Tracy, welcome back to the British History podcast and channel.
Thank you. It's lovely to chat to you again.
Yes, and to do this interview in person. Obviously, we see each other, but I think all our interviews have been online so far. So this is nice.
It's a treat, and we've, saved it for quite a special place.
Yes. So we're at Harvington Hall for the Harvington History Festival 2025, where you'll be speaking shortly, and you are talking about one of your latest books, because you're doing and I've put it behind you, Holbein and the Ambassadors, but we'll come to that. And it's you're talking about the year 1533, pivotal year in Tudor history. It's a big year for Henry VIII. He's got a new wife. He's created his own position in the church, and he's got a new heir, Elizabeth. Mm-hmm. So I'll let you take over the story. Why is this year so noteworthy then?
Well, it is, I think, the most important year in Tudor England. As you say, it's the year that Henry VIII, he marries Anne Boleyn. His annulment from Catherine of Aragon comes through, although, not till he's already married somebody else. And then, yes, the birth of Elizabeth, who should have been a boy. And it's at this time when there's this huge melting pot in England with all of this going on, that the two ambassadors featured in this famous Holbein painting arrive. So Jean de Dinteville, who arrives in January 1533, and then Georges de Selve in April. And they're sent by Francis I and Charles V, respectively. So these two great superpowers, they want to know what on earth's going on with Henry VIII. And, it must have been like watching a soap opera at the time. It's all going on. And so Jean, who in the painting is the one on the left, he's dressed in pink, and he's the one who commissions Holbein to kind of capture this moment in time. And I just think it's a remarkable painting because it's filled with all these little secret messages and symbols and clues as to what the hell is going on in England.
I mean, it's a famous painting. Most people watching will probably have seen it, because it's just, even if you don't understand the symbolism of it, it's quite a spectacle to look at, because it's so busy in a way, but very well balanced.
Yes, it is.
So we've got these two ambassadors. They've come from, the superpowers of Europe, trying to work out. It's funny, isn't it, with Henry, because and with this period, in that because we're looking back, we can get a little bit not blasé about it, but just to understand what it must have been like seeing it unfold.
Yeah,
absolutely. What's going on is completely unprecedented.
Yes.
And they I can see why they'd be over here going.
Yeah, and of course, they want the up-to-date gossip, information. How on earth is the king breaking from Rome? What's that all about? And how can he marry one woman while he's still married to another? And it's just shocking. So, of course, these two great leaders and Henry's greatest rivals, they want information and they want it up to date. And so Jean arrives, and I love it because his letters are full of complaints. He hates London. He doesn't want to leave his beautiful French chateau and come over to rainy old London, so he's complaining.
January,
it's January, it's cold, he's got a cold when he arrives. Whereas we think, as historians, God, we'd love to go back to that time. He's just like, doesn't want to be there. But he's been told, you've got to stay until Anne is crowned. And so, and then when she is crowned, I think poor old Jean, his heart must have sunk because she's visibly pregnant. So he thinks, oh God, I'm not going to be allowed to go home until this child is born. And indeed, his royal master, Francis I, has been appointed godfather. So absolutely he can't go. So he has to stay longer. And there's a good theory that this is why he's a bit bored, actually, hanging around all this time, longer than he thought. So he thinks, I'll kill some time, I'll get my portrait painted by Holbein. And that could have been why we have this world famous painting. But I think there are so many meanings within it that Jean decides to make the most of this painting, that it captures his friendship with Georges de Selve. Clearly they know each other, they're very fond of each other. But as you say, it's quite a crowded picture. They're standing either side of two shelves with lots of weird and wonderful objects on them. And each of those objects carries a little clue about what's going on in England and Europe. There's an awful lot about division and things turned upside down, and it's all, the messaging isn't very subtle in this painting.
Where was the painting going to hang?
So
Who was going to see it?
It was for Jean's chateau, the Chateau of Policy, in the Champagne region of France. And he'd only recently inherited the chateau upon the death of his father, and he was, refurbishing it and having a wonderful time. And that's when he got the call, "You've got to go to London."
Oh,
so
doubly awful.
Doubly awful. He's got to leave Champagne and go to rainy old London, and I think it's very much on his mind, his chateau, and so he thinks actually this painting would be great for Policy, and indeed we know that he took it back with him when he left towards the end of 1533, and that he hung the painting in the Great Hall at Policy, and there it remained for quite a few years, actually, at least 100 years, because it turns up in an inventory the following century. So it became this prized family possession, really, and a real talking point, I'd imagine.
So it encapsulates his friendship with Georges.
Yes.
Georges, how would you pronounce
Well,
it?
my French is terrible, but Georges.
Georges.
Yes, yeah.
Is that unusual?
It's very unusual, and it led me to question the nature of their relationship, because to be shown like that, full length, that's a typical pose for marriage portraits. It's quite rare to have just two friends shown in the same sort of stance as these two are. And there's the sort of dominant male on the left, Jean, and then the more submissive Georges. There are other little clues that there might have been something more to their relationship, but we'll probably never know for sure. All we do know is that neither man married, neither of them had children, and so in fact the painting passed to Jean's niece and then down through her family. But it's highly unusual. Usually with Holbein portraits, as you know, it's kind of head and shoulders, it's just one person, it's quite simple, but this one clearly is intended to convey a whole other set of messages.
So let's talk about those messages then. I suppose it's most famous for the skull.
Yes.
Which is, I suppose, a typical memento mori.
Exactly, which was Jean's motto, actually, memento mori. So death is on his mind. It's still quite a conundrum as to why this whopping great distorted skull is there. It looks like a sort of smudge. Apparently one French schoolboy who visited the National Gallery and was asked, "What do you think this is?" thought it was a baguette. It's been thought to be a cuttlefish bone by one of the curators at the National Gallery. And then, of course, we know now it's an example of anamorphosis, which is a distortion technique. And there's the famous portrait of Henry VIII's son, Edward VI, in the National Portrait Gallery that uses that. You look at it head on and his face is stretched out. And then you go to one side and it snaps into perspective, which is the same with the skull. There's another skull in the painting. Maybe I should challenge your listeners to find it. And there is also, top left of the painting, one of my favourite bits of it, a half-concealed crucifix. So the message is, it's all very, doom and gloom. There's death here, there's death there, but there's salvation if you look hard enough, because it's sort of hidden behind a curtain.
So have we got a mix of messages that are personal to him and almost a diary of what's happening at the time?
Yes. So those objects really tell the story of this division within Europe, the Reformation, what's happening in England. In fact, you literally have a book all about division in mathematics, and it's kind of open at the page, all about division. And then there is a globe which shows Europe turned upside down. And there are musical instruments like a lute with a string missing, a case of flutes with one missing, which would lead to disharmony. So that theme really comes out very strongly from all of those weird and wonderful scientific objects that you see displayed on the shelves. But we might not know all the meanings, we might not have them correct. There are lots of objects, we've kind of worked out some of them. But, you know, who knows what mysteries will be solved in future years.
Yeah. So does everything have a theory, or are there literally some of the objects that is like no one's got anything yet?
And I think most things have a theory. The one that's probably the most contentious is the shepherd's dial. It's this cylindrical dial on the top shelf. And it appears to show a date of the 11th of April, which was when Anne Boleyn was accorded royal honours. So this led to a theory that Anne Boleyn commissioned this painting. Really don't think she did, given the rest of it is quite critical to what's happening around her marriage to Henry. But the date can also be read as the 15th of August, which I understand is in the Catholic calendar, the Assumption of the Virgin Mary, so a very Catholic date. So it's controversial, but then there's another theory that says neither of those dates are accurate because it's a dial that relies on the sun, and this is painted inside. So it's a talking point. You wouldn't believe the heated debates over the shepherd's dial and which date exactly it shows. But that's one that we still like to discuss.
So given that it has controversial messages in it, was it a risk for Holbein to paint this?
You'd think so. Although I suppose he was painting for his paymaster, who was Jean d'Anteville, a very good Catholic French gentleman. But I think it's likely that this painting was actually shown off at Henry's court before Jean took it to England. Certainly there are similarities with other paintings that Holbein then went on to do. And I'm thinking in particular of the Whitehall mural, where you have these it's in fact four standing figures in that, either side of a sort of piece of furniture, if you like. Quite similar stance that Jean d'Anteville has to Henry VIII in that painting. In fact, when the National Gallery first acquired the ambassadors, nobody knew who the two men were. They thought they were courtiers of Henry VIII. And there was even a theory that Jean was Henry VIII himself because he's got a beard and he's well dressed. So it seems likely that Holbein, because this is a spectacular painting, used it to kind of get himself some future work and show it off a little bit.
That's what I can do for
Exactly. You. Look, I'm good at anamorphosis. I do this distortion. It could literally be there because of that, just to plonk this great skull there, just almost as a sales pitch to get future work.
Wow. So how does it come into the possession of National Gallery? So
it starts with the French Revolution, which is a dangerous time to be an aristocrat in France and to own a beautiful chateau like the d'Anteville family own policy. So they sort of pack up their valuables during the Revolution, and the painting goes to Paris, and from there a member of the family sells it into England. And it's bought by the Earl of Radnor, who displays it at Longford Castle in Wiltshire, which was one of those moments where things come full circle, because Longford is the scene of my novel trilogy, The King's Witch. It's based on the family who lived at Longford. And I thought, oh wow, I love that coincidence. So it was there for a while, but then a more impoverished Earl of Radnor sold it to the National Gallery about 100 years later in 1890. And it immediately made the headlines. It was a front page of the Times because it was so mysterious. It's like, what are these objects about? And who are these two men? And I love the fact it was a female historian working in just at the end of the Victorian period who noticed on the globe policy. Now, why have this tiny little chateau of policy picked out on a globe? And so while everybody else was saying, well, it must be Henry VIII or Thomas Wyatt or all these Englishmen, she thought, I wonder if it's a Frenchman, and I wonder what the connection with policy is. So she searched through the inventories of policy. Sadly, it doesn't exist anymore, the chateau. And she found a list of the possessions, including a very well-described painting. And that's how she worked out that it was Jean and Georges, not Henry VIII or his courtiers.
That's wonderful. Well, we'll finish there. That's a wonderful point to finish on. Tracy, where can people find you online?
So my website is tracyborman.co.uk, but I'm on Instagram, tracy.borman. I'm on X, Facebook. I am on TikTok. I'm pretty rubbish on TikTok, but I'm on most of the socials, yeah.
Right. Well, thank you so much.
Pleasure.